In today's episode, we chat all about design, UI, UX with Nathan Powell. Let's deploy. Hello and welcome to Push to Prod. I'm your co-host Cole and I work on Use-A-Lot, building tools that help SaaS companies deliver more effective customer success.
And I'm your co-host Dan Miller. I'm building a SaaS for the first time and learning as I go. Each episode, we chat about all sorts of things to do with the world of starting, growing and operating software businesses. Today, it's the 21st of June, and for all those people who are in the Northern Hemisphere, we're very envious of you. You've got lovely warm weather. It was -5 here in Canberra last night, and I've been dodging black ice on the road on my bicycle. Well, that's not too bad, but the reason why we thought we'd talk about the Northern Hemisphere is we've got a guest on today from the Northern Hemisphere, from the lovely world of Spain. We've got Nathan J. Powell. Now, Nathan, we've been working in the background on a bit of UX stuff and UI stuff, and we thought, you know what? We know someone out there who's actually a serious professional in this space, so that we thought we'd have a conversation with Nathan. Nathan's the founder of 3 products, Nusi. He worked on that a while ago with Michael Copper, and then he also developed the solution course called Develop Your UX, and he's also building a product called Feature Flux, which is a design collaboration tool. So who better to get on the conversation about UX and UI than Nathan? Welcome, Nathan.
Hey guys, nice to be here. Nice and bright and early here in Spain.
Yeah, well, I'm just going to tee off on what Dan said, that how cold it is. It's not -5 here, but it was about 4 today, and I'm freezing. And my gas fireplace broke, so I've got a month of cold.
No,
yeah,
bad news.
I've got the air conditioning on already, so 8 a.m. I've got the air conditioning on.
Nathan's up there, just having a siesta in 30 degrees, just balmy, loving it.
Thanks so much, Nathan, for coming on. Yeah, as Dan said, we've been back and forth a bit on building some new stuff and talking about UX, and we were about to do an episode on, can developers learn how to build good UI and good UX? And then we thought, hang on, we better not do it. Let's get someone on who knows what they're talking about. And hence that's why we invited you. So yeah,
cool.
Do you want to give the listeners? I think most people might know you, but if not, do you want to give us a quick just background of how you came to be where you are, I guess, and what you're interested in and things?
Yeah, sure. So I've been a designer since 2005. As when I started. So back in the days when magazines were a thing, that's where I started in editorial design. And then that kind of went the way of the dodo, and I had to sort of morph into this web designer when tables were still a thing, and I actually started learning code back then, and I did code stuff, but I was terrible. So I quickly learned that, no, I think my skills are better put to use, on the other side of things through what was then just visual design. And come 2013, I started building, or rather I started designing my very first own product, my SaaS, which was, as you mentioned, Nusi Proposals, which is still going today, which I sold. But it was there that the whole usability journey started, because before that it had all pretty much been website design or visual design. But everything changes once you start getting customers, right? You start getting people who want to pay you every month to use a service, and things change dramatically. It's not just some static design, shall we say, that looks good and promotes something. It's something that people need to interact with and to be able to use and to understand how it works and to function as they expect it to work. And so that was really where things kind of took off for me back in 2013. And so over the last 10 years, I've basically been focused on what is product design and how things do work, how they should work, how users would like them to work, how they expect them to work, which are all completely different things, of course. And so that's pretty much where I've been for the last 10 years. I'm working now as a freelance product designer. So I'm typically working with SaaS that have incidentally been developer designed and built, which I think is very common, particularly on the smaller side of the SaaS world. Obviously, if you get into big investment, then you obviously have your teams with your designers, your developers, your UX, your marketing, everything. But I think particularly for smaller scale businesses, the development team led design is very, very common. And luckily for me, it is, because that's usually where I get called in.
That's your source.
Yeah, usually is where I get called in, maybe typically a couple of years down the road, because they start to see things have begun to implode. Once you get past the initial app, it's like, oh, we need to add this, and then things kind of start to fall apart, shall we say? And that's typically where I'm sort of helping folks out.
Cool.
Nice.
It might be a good segue just before we get deep into it, is just sort of start throwing. We've been throwing around words like UI and design and product design and even development. I thought it might be good just make sure we're on the same page and sort of work out what are those terms. Like, where does product, UI, UX, and sort of engineering, and are they 4 different things? Are they 3 different things? They do. Like, where do you see? I guess both of you guys, Dan and Nathan. Like, where do you see the biggest challenges and things that you see missing in startups? Is it, obviously I think engineering, most startups tend to be tech heavy, so that's probably fine. But then you've got this idea of like UI design, making things look nice, UX, a little bit more of how does it, operate, things like that. And then you just got product in general, which is, are we solving the right thing? Are we building the right thing? That type of thing. Do you guys, is that how you split it up in your head, or is there sort of a different way of breaking these down?
I think so many of those roles have been melted now into one, should we say, almost, especially as I said, those developer-led design teams, should we say, design in air quotes, because they're having to think of everything. The developer who was never trained to think about UI or to think about usability is having to take all of this into account. And so I think so many of these roles have been distilled down now. And the caveat here is I'm pretty much always referring to smaller businesses, So for me, like as a product designer, for me and for the way that my clients understand it, the product incorporates both the usability aspect of it and the visual, should we say, the user interface aspect of it, because so many of these terms as well have different meanings depending on who you talk to as well. Obviously, like the product manager has nothing to do with the product designer as in what they do. So it can be a little confusing especially if you're speaking to people outside maybe of these roles. But I think so many of them cross over. I think for me, at least, on the outside looking in, the one that always remains apart is the development itself, because let's face it, without the development, without the code, without the structure, pretty much nothing else outside of that exists. So for me, I think there are, I'd say, almost 2 groups. So the development and then product, at least for me in my space. So the product incorporating, usability and visual, shall we say, user interface.
Yeah, that makes sense. Dan, is that sort of how you see it, at least for these smaller scale startup sizes? Yeah.
You've always got to be, we'll probably get into this a bit later, but yeah, you've definitely got to be scrappy in the early days for smaller teams. For larger teams, for sure. I like the separation there, because then you can actually specialize and get the people that know what they're doing to sort of focus in their area. Not everyone's going to be good at everything at all times, right? So yeah.
Yeah, and it's probably analogous. Like you flip it around the other way, and you're a product guy, product UI guy, and you're trying to hire developers to build your SaaS. You're not going to go out and I just need a DevOps. You need a developer who can build the whole thing. And I guess it's the same thing with startups. When we start thinking about, I'm missing, something's not right with my UI UX. How I got to thinking about this was, well, can I get better at that? And I guess that's sort of filling in the background of where we got to here, especially with Use a lot, is I would say we're very tech heavy. And when I say tech, it's not even that. We're good at dev, we're good at sales, we're even good at marketing. We've actually got a lot of that now for our experience, but none of us are tried and true and bred and educated or whatever you call it, like UI, UX people. And so that's a massive sort of gap, but we have enough technical expertise. So you start thinking about, well, hang on, how prescriptive or how much process is actually involved in skilling up on this stuff, at least to some level that could be acceptable,
And so you're probably asking the question, should we do this ourselves? Can we do this? Is it a good idea for us, tech heavy folks to get involved and try and figure this out and to get good at design? Can we do it? And that's the question I think we're focusing on today. Can design be learnt to a good enough standard by folks in the technical side of it? Or, should you always think about using an expert? That's the question, what we're going about today.
Always use an expert. Always use an expert. I'm available for hire.
Clearly.
Yeah, but obviously you've developed a course, you're a consultant on it. I mean, when you find these, are they, they've just hit the thing's fallen apart, and you sort of go, dudes, you should have started earlier. Is it like that, or what's your experience?
Well, my experience is that, in most cases, I feel a bit sorry for the developer because, they really have done the best that they can in putting the system together, and they've added things on. It's usually just a case of, as the system grows and as the app grows, obviously they want to add features and they want to add, more capabilities to it. So they kind of just get tacked on. And of course they do it in a way that makes sense to them as a developer because, we don't think in the same way typically. What makes sense logically to a developer, perhaps. And obviously, these are all general broad strokes, but what makes sense logically to a developer, coming from a code point of view, and also probably trying to bear in mind as well a little bit how the user will interact and feel about this. It's different to how somebody who specializes in usability or product will think about it, because they will have more experience in actually interactions within a given piece of software. And I think one of the biggest things I see, one of the biggest problems I see is when I'm called into a project is that things really are tacked on in the most ad hoc kind of way. And that one page may have this layout, and then the second page that they're clicking through to fulfill an action actually has a different layout with all of a sudden the buttons have been moved from here to here to allow for another interaction that they see as necessary. And all of the things the developer has done are correct in that, yes, to click from here to get to this action is correct, and then they need to be able to undertake another action, for example. But they kind of forget that, the user wants to have a consistent experience. They want to know that, okay, so when I click through up on the top right, this button is still going to be here and it's not going to be moved just because they needed to allow for another set of actions. So while what the developer is doing is logical and you could follow their reasoning, it doesn't necessarily translate into something that a customer or a user is going to feel comfortable with. So to get back to your question, can a development team or a developer learn the necessary skills to be proficient enough? I think the very short answer to that is yes. It's because I think as well there's a distinction between, should we call it a graphic designer, a visual designer, and what is a user interface designer as well, because you can be creative with user interface design, but at the same time everything is so standardized now. If we just think about something like Tailwind, love it or hate it, and probably more designers hate it than developers do, but it's very standardized for a reason, because we have become used to certain layouts, certain looks, the left-hand sidebar down the right, or the primary navigation along the top right with maybe the user profile and the settings in the top right, or down the top in the bottom left at the sidebar. All these things we've become so used to using that when somebody tries to invent or logically add a next step, i.e. developer, I'm looking at you, it throws the user off because, I'm not used to it.
Jarring.
I'm not used to something like that. I would expect it to be here because that's what we see over and over and over again in all these apps that we use on a daily basis. It's standardized for a reason. And so that means that, yes, it's something that can definitely be learned by the developer, the founder, or whoever needs to be. Will they be at the same level as, a UX designer who's been doing it for 10, 15, 20 years? No, probably not. But just getting those basic principles is going to allow you to move in a far safer direction and, not upset your users and therefore not upset your boss or your founder or whoever that might be. So yeah, definitely.
Glad to say that, because that's, I was thinking that exact thing. I think it was today or yesterday. I was thinking about this podcast. I was like, the fact that there's all these common layouts and structures to, landing pages. And I know that, you get videos where they're like, do something original and break out of that and stuff. But I'm like, that's not my job. I'm not I think the UI, the person who's good at it should break out of it. The person who's just trying to get a job done, I think it's great. Because to me then because I'm this founder that's starting to think about how do I get better at it? And when I think about better at it, I know where to go to Tailwind. I know which YouTube channels I want to go to look at different layouts and stuff. So I find myself then struggling because I don't put enough time into just mastering, I guess, the tools. Like you give me a whiteboard and I'll mock up a cool thing. And I did it today. I was like, we were trying to do something on Figma. I went, fuck this, let's go to the whiteboard. And we just smash stuff out. And I'm like, that's the bits that's missing. That's the bit I'm missing. I want to be able to sit in front of Figma with the team and just smash something out quickly.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about the idea that there's probably near enough is good enough in the early days of a product? So my thoughts there, and I want to put this out there to see what you guys think. You're starting a product for the first time. Maybe you're a small team or a solo founder and you haven't got that much resources and you've got to do everything as a crew or as by yourself. So your idea is just get something up and running, get it working, and just start checking and validating your idea first with customers. See if they actually like it. See if you've got something of value for them there and see if they'll start buying it for you. Just get it going. And then at some point, figure out a way to potentially bring someone else in, because maybe you've got a bit of revenue. Bring someone else in to start improving and polishing things. What do you guys think about that as an approach, or is that a dangerous approach? I'm not sure.
My thoughts on that have changed over the years. So before I started my first SaaS, I was clearly in the camp of, no, get a UI designer in, get it to look great, because otherwise users won't want to use it. They won't even want to sign up for it. All this good stuff, and I think a lot of visual designers still believe that, and there is a lot of truth. There is a huge caveat in that. Yes, good design, good visual designs creates confidence in the potential user, because we can see that it's something that looks, appears to have a level that we would associate it with whatever price tag is being assigned to it, But I think over the years that has changed for me, at least in that I've worked with so many clients now who are running multi-million-dollar SaaS businesses, and their app still looks like it was designed in Excel, basically,
Salesforce.
Yeah. These old Microsoft apps, and they are still running and they're still making millions. So I think there's two sides to this. Is like, one, is it really truly this idea, this software providing a valuable service, a valuable product? And in which case, if it is, users will always be willing to pay for that, to have that. It's the age-old solving a real problem, isn't it? If it's solving a real problem, users are willing to put up with maybe something that doesn't look like it just stepped out of an Apple, ad. Because primary function of any piece of software is to get a job done. After that, everything else comes. Now, all the designers out there will kill me for saying that, but that's the primary goal of a software, isn't it? Of a piece of software is to get a job done and to make it easier to get a job done. So once that has been established, then yeah, sure, let's take a look at the visual aspect of it. And when I say like getting the job done, I'm talking about, is it easy to get the job done? Is it easy to use to get this done? From there, you can definitely either, if you're not in the situation to do it yourself, bring in a part-time, UX consultant or something and say, okay, is this where it needs to be to make the user the happiest possible, should we say, using the software? And from there, make those improvements, make the layouts, the standardization, should we say, of every interaction, the consistency, the contrast and all this stuff that a lot of people tend to forget, and then actually make it look great as well. But I think by far the most important aspect of it is it working? Does it do a good job of solving the problem? And are people happy? And I would argue that the UI first software that we see so much of around the web, 99% of those apps go the way of the dodo within the first 12 months. But I would argue that an ugly app that is solving a real problem is going to stay around for years and years, and they're the ones that are going to make the money. So, sorry to my fellow design brethren, but it's the design can almost take a back seat, at least for a while. It's not the most important thing at the beginning of a product.
Interesting.
It's probably one of these iterative things, isn't it? Like these days, I totally 100% agree. I think trying to catch, there's probably some things you want right in terms of to catch someone initially, either through your landing page stuff, and that's probably still UX. Yeah. Like, don't put up barriers, make it really easy, and get them into the product ASAP. And then you want to show value, and that doesn't have to be perfect. I think from there, though, to get the real love and the real probably brand awareness, that's where I think maybe the level has come up. Do you know what I mean? Like even these days when you go look at a tech, like it happens a lot actually on technical libraries and stuff, and you see their websites and the level of even their developer documentation in terms of branding and stuff. Like you could see the level it's not just a GitHub repo anymore.
Bar has been risen. I can remember, you could pick up like the most ugly printed thing, looked like it was done on a typewriter, and you could, that you'd be sitting there going, oh, that's great. Let's dive into that and you'd use it. No way on earth would anyone accept that anymore these days. They'd be going, what is this junk? What are you talking about?
Well, I definitely choose it. Like if I'm looking for a new UI library or a new technical thing, I'll go look at the couple of websites, different options I got. I'll probably pick the one that, they've spent the most time looking at the branding in the UI, even of their website, which is kind of funny because it's got nothing to do with the actual library under the covers.
So yeah, there is some sort of like subjective minimum, isn't there now, that people expect beyond. If you go below that and it starts just looking like absolute junk, people might start sort of questioning it, going, I'm not really sure about the quality of this thing, or, how much effort's been put into it. Is it going to be around a long time? So there is potentially a bit of that, yeah.
I also think it depends which market you're working in, because there are so many, even though we'll say B2B SaaS products out there, but there are so many that, should we say, B to pro consumer type softwares out there, and those are the ones, obviously B2C and pro consumer, the ones who want all the bells and whistles and fancy, and it needs to look amazing. Whereas again, I think the B2B, obviously, yes, depending on the segment you're working with, it needs to be more or less polished depending. I mean, obviously, if you're putting out a piece of software that's going to be going into banks, then, you can't just throw them up that sort of almost a wireframe looking piece of software, because there's elements of trust are, very closely aligned with that aesthetic as well. So it does depend on the market that you're looking to work with, I think.
And that's totally true with like even B2B when you're targeting like self-sign up, and this is what you're talking about, like that whole, if I'm going to throw something off on Product Hunt or something like that, I want to make sure the thing is easy to use and people can just use it. Whereas if I'm selling to, 5-figure deals to, high value, long onboarding cycles, I could like in the early days of Social Pinpoint, which is my old startup, like we did the setup. So the back end, we used a Rails library called Active Admin, still in there today, which is just it generates your admin, looks like crap. We branded it a little bit, but it was so clunky that we used to do all these CSV uploads and all that sort of stuff because we could do it. Like the client didn't have to do it anyway. So I guess it's kind of funny that the bigger end deals can probably almost have the crappier UIs and the cheaper ones need more investment on the UIs and make it look nice. It's sort of this inverted cost thing.
Yeah, it's that difference, isn't it, between the manual onboard and the self-serve. And I think part of the manual onboard as well is also part of what creates the confidence there, or the trust, is the fact that, okay, they know there is actually somebody behind this piece of software because they're walking me through the setup, or they're creating my account for me, or I'm talking to them on the phone. So I think these are almost very different beasts, No,
it's all about trust. And if you can afford to have that relationship and build that trust, you're replacing the need for doing that through the user interface and the user experience. Whereas if you're not doing that because of cost point and all that, you're building out. So that the problem is still there. It's all about trust and relationships. And you lean on either the person or you lean on the design and the brand. Yeah, it's a good point.
It's, as you guys have been talking, I've just been thinking in the background something that's happening literally live in the last 24 hours. And it's exactly what you just said, Nathan. It depends on the industry. It depends on the market. Have you guys been keeping up with some of the chatter that's been going on online about Google Analytics 4? For those that aren't aware, Google Analytics, that's the stuff you put behind the scenes to keep track of, who's using your website, where they're coming from, that sort of thing. They've recently moved from the version 3 over to a new version called number 4. Yeah, it's so funny. You're seeing some of the comments going out on live. If you've ever heard of one of the indie hackers, Danny Postma, he's pretty famous around the traps. His statement recently was, who the F approved Google Analytics for? And there's other people sitting there saying, in other news, Google Analytics 4 is still shh. But, I wish someone would still build something better. So what's going on there is it's exactly what you said, Nathan. The pain is high enough. The industry is such that everyone gets value out of it. So maybe the UI actually doesn't matter because people are still in there and they're still going to hand over their credit card to use the thing, right?
Yeah. I still don't understand the difference of those.
But it shows the point, doesn't it? Like, you can have a situation unfolding where because it's a burning need and there's not much alternative, people will just deal with it.
And they also have that established brand name as well, don't they? So it's a big divider as well. Like you said, if you have the brand name, to a certain point you can do what you want, because even if they hate it right now, in 6 months, if they improve it or whatever, or completely scrap it or change it, then people will come back and they'll be fine with it. So it just depends who you are. It really does as well. It's unfair, but it does.
So like you said, so just going right back to sort of our conclusion from the initial statement of can we learn it, the answer was sort of like yes. So, and given that you have a course and you've obviously, I'm assuming then have helped people learn, is it like, what's the first steps, I guess? Is it finding a course? Is it finding someone? Is it just getting in there and rolling up your sleeves? And what Dan does, just need to know how to make a marketing site. I'm just going to do it one weekend. That's what he did. So
That's right.
Is it that? Like, how do you recommend someone kick off that journey?
I think for one thing, and this is probably the most difficult thing out of the entire process, is finding dedicated time to upskill. Because if you're working full time as the main developer or one of the developers on your, whether it's a team or whether it's just your own product, obviously you need to be able to say, well, okay, I'm going to find 5 hours a week or 1 day a week or whatever it might be to actually try and learn about this new area. And I think that's probably the hardest thing. If I was going to look to learn a new skill now, I would probably struggle to find the time. There's so much going on. But I think, having said that, if you can find the time, which is obviously you need to, then I think is where you need to start looking into things like, obviously, books are a great source of information always. There are some classic books out there that have been classics forever and will remain to be so. Yes, there are courses all over the place as well for UX design. There are a bunch of free ones out there as well. Even if we just think about something like Skillshare, they always have introductory offers. I think at this point, I don't want to tell you to go out and just sign up to everything, because obviously it could be a complete waste of time and you could be learning things that aren't potentially that helpful, or you could be learning contradictory things depending on who you're talking to within the industry. But I think just being able to sit down, just making a decision one way or the other. Okay, so these are a couple of great books that have been recommended to me by someone I know and trust who works in the industry. This is a course that's been recommended to me. Taking those things on board. Another, I think an ideal thing as well is if you do have someone on the team who is working in UX, but not exclusively perhaps, that mentor, should we say, in air quotes, just not so much for someone to teach you, but to be able to reference. So say, I'm thinking about doing this, or I'm thinking about switching this up here. What do you think? And for them to be able to come back and say, well, do you know what? I like your thinking, if they're being polite, but maybe it would be better if we stick to this, slightly more standard idea of doing this. I think it's probably one of the biggest helps you can have is just having that point of reference with somebody who knows, or just a little, or maybe even just a little bit further down the road than you are in your process, of learning more about sort of UX and UI. And of course, the other thing as well is YouTube obviously is immense. So if there is any particular area you want to look at, like, our sign-up form sucks, or our drop-off rates are terrible. One of the easiest things to do now is just to go and Google that, right? Or to YouTube it. And usually, again, there are a bunch of common reasons why your sign-up form drop-off is so huge. Maybe you're one of the businesses that has 12 fields all on one page and only actually 2 of them are required. Everything else is just because we want to feel good about getting more data on our customers. We want to feel good that we've just had, a Fortune 500 sign up. Whereas that's just annoying, a potential sign up and actually making them think about going elsewhere. These are all things that you can, of course, get later in the process. It doesn't mean to say that you don't have to get these data points now, but just make it, as you were saying before, Colin, just make it as quick and simple to get into the software, let them have a look around, then we can get that information from them. But I think so. Books, courses, if you can find someone who's a little bit further down the road to help you, a mentor type role, great. Even I think there are some courses as well where you can actually have one-on-one access to the course creator, and I think something like that is very valuable as well. And then of course there are communities, but all of this requires a lot of time. And can you eke out enough time? So,
and as a founder or as a tech, something like that, that's that thing that the thing you talked about, Dan, where it's like always like referencing, do I spend that time or do I just pay someone else? And my other time, because I'm good at XYZ, is better spent doing XYZ, You always a constant debate.
I actually wish I had known about your stuff a while ago, Nathan. Now, full disclaimer here, I've only just come across it, so apologies if I'm coming across a bit green here. I asked the question about, 3 months ago. I posted it. It was just a thought, that a bubble that I put out to myself, because I was actually just struggling a bit. I was playing around with some ideas about how I was going to build a marketing site. What should I do? Geez, I'm pretty bad at building UI. So I just shot a message out into the ether, into Twitter, and just said, I want to up my UI game, my UI UX game. What should I do? Where should I start? And a few people got in touch with me, and majority of the responses were, just get into it, just start building, just start having a go. And apologies in advance, I've just actually come across your Develop Your UX course that you've got there. I'm thinking, man, why didn't I actually know about this then? Because I was in the mode, I was in the mindset. So I'm actually going to probably set aside a bit of time now and do it. There you go. You got one person signed up.
The reason you didn't know is because I suck at marketing. But, and that's another skill set, isn't it? That's another skill set. So
I'm not trying to promote you here. So anyone who's listening to this thinking this is stage, it's not. I literally am just coming off the cuffy. It looks exactly like the sort of thing I needed. So thank you.
they're really good in that, and like things like, obviously the Tailwind guy, what's his name? What is it, Wavin? What's his name?
Adam Wavin.
Adam Wavin, yeah. Because he's the one who did Refactoring UI book, wasn't it? Yeah. So like that's just a classic, awesome tech book that, yeah. So obviously I've gone down that path. You're right, Nathan. It's all time. And then it's one of these things where sometimes you got to go, hey, if I really want to do it, there's no substitute for just getting in and doing it. You can talk about it all you want.
Exactly. And something awesome like that book, Refactoring, the great thing about that is that it leads quite literally by example, because you can read and read and read all you want, but actually seeing examples and like, okay, this is the right way to do it, this is the incorrect way to do it. It's so much easier, I think, having it visually there in front of you, being able to say, okay, so this might be how you create your sign-up form, but actually this is a bad idea because, and then showing you a better alternative. I think it's far easier to be able to take that example and put it into practice than just saying, these are all the guidelines and this is the theory behind why. And, that can be great and interesting in its own little world. But, we're building software and we need something that's practical and that we can actually look at and follow almost a set of rules perhaps, and just know that we're moving forward in the right direction or in the best possible direction.
Yeah, that's so I guess I was going to ask another question, but you sort of hinted at it before, is the tools that we are using now, like, I guess, are they making it easier? And are you seeing like I brought up Figma before, like how, from your perspective, how sort of central are all these tools? Like, are they all coalescing to say Figma, which then goes to sort of whatever, like if you're doing websites, Webflow or whatever, or Figma to React if you're doing front end development? Like, is it getting to the point where you can almost just focus on a small handset, or handful, or is there different thought leadership groups that are like, we do this and someone else uses something else? Or like how divided is the community, I guess?
Not very, because
really.
Figma have come in and they've absolutely taken over.
Is it?
Everything.
Okay, that's cool.
I read, I think it was last week, the market share now on, or the usage share, should we say, on design software. And I think, I don't remember the exact figures now. This was for 2022. Figma was basically, I think it was up like 85% of all design
market
teams.
Share.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. And like, so, and you think after that, like Adobe XD, obviously they're the same thing now, Adobe, but like XD, which was the second biggest player, was like, sort of I don't know, 10% or something of the market share. So you can imagine everything else after that was just a tiny little slither of the market. So basically Figma is king, you know.
You sort of want healthy competition, but I tell you, when you're coming in to learn stuff, it's always nice to know that you only have to like look at sort of, you know, one thing. You don't have to like choose. True. Like that's front end. I feel sorry for people. Well, these days it's getting a bit better, but I've talked to Dan about this before, where it's like you tried to get into Node or, you know, front end development, say 10 years ago, and there was just so much different versions, you know. There still is now, but at least it's React and Node and, you know, that, like there's no real less choice. And that, I think that's good, you know, sometimes when you're trying to learn, because you just get analysis paralysis. Otherwise you're like, what the hell, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's so broadly documented now. And in fact, I think probably the Figma documentation is probably the least used documentation perhaps out there, because there's just so much out there now, you know, so many users, so many evangelists, and there are just tutorials everywhere. There are courses for Figma, video courses, you know, just everything you could imagine. So, you know, if you were looking to get into just one piece of software to do everything, you know, with your wireframing, your designs, you know, even then being able to sort of, because it will give you the code as well behind what you've designed. That's probably the easiest route for any developer looking to do that. And it's actually a very intuitive tool as well. The only thing I use outside of that, because I'm old school, is I do all my wireframing in Balsamic.
It's a good old one. I love that one.
Yeah. Shout out to Pelty.
Yeah, man. It's for me, I'm quicker in Balsamic than I am on pen and paper. So I just I find one of the perhaps downsides of using Figma for wireframing, although a lot of designers do, is that it can tend to just be a bit too high, you know, sort of high touch, high res, and give the wrong impression. Whereas, you know, we all know, and if you don't know, Balsamic is just very rough and ready. It gives it that old marker pen kind of look.
I have graduated a little bit from I shouldn't say graduated because that's probably the wrong word, but like I liked Whimsical for that, because it felt like a little bit more upper than Balsamic and gave me some other tools, you know, like mind mapping and stuff. But yeah, when I found that with Figma, that obviously do use it, but it's like I tend to start wanting to do things a little bit too perfect, or
even just the completely straight lines.
Do X, Y, Z. yeah, that's right. Yeah, so it's good having those options. Yeah, no, I totally agree. I will have to check out Balsamic. I haven't looked at it for a few years.
It's awesome. I've used it for years as well. It's one of those things where if you're in a team or if you're in a larger group and you've got some customers that you're dealing with, you're building stuff for other people. It's so good at taking away their focus on the details. You know how when you try and put a design in front of someone and they just zero in on the color or that's the wrong shape. Whereas Balsamic's just so good at it. It just says, forget about all that. That's not what we're here to talk about. Let's focus on the UX and the UI. So it's good. Yeah.
That's what they always say too. Like if you are doing it pen and paper, use a really thick pen, you know, like it's going to be really big. Like make everything just big and thick, and, you know, so you can't complain about, oh, that's too thin, or it should be this size. Yeah. No, I like it. So I don't know, like we're probably, you know, getting closer to the end of the show here. Like, is there anything, Nathan, that you think other tips or resources people should go to, or anything that, you know, just to sort of help someone, I guess, kick off on the right foot?
Yeah, I think kind of general tips is more just don't try and reinvent the wheel is probably the biggest tip, because I think that's where most developer-led design teams, should we say, fall. Do follow the standards. I know that we think we're being boring, but standards exist for a reason, you know, because, you know, they say, you know, familiarity breeds contempt, but not when you're using software. You know, the user expects to be able to find something in this place and to be able to use it into an interaction to go somewhere they expect to. So by all means, be boring, you know, follow the standards out there. And even if you are starting to learn, yes, go ahead and directly copy what you're seeing in your favorite pieces of software. I mean, I don't mean the UI and the branding and all that, but the way the layouts are done, the interactions, how a user is getting from A to B, even the language that we're using. You know, language is such a huge part of any piece of software, and we tend to, or rather, a lot of software tends to forget this and just use the very static and very direct order of submit or
submit, you know, save, cancel.
You know, exactly. You know, and those kind of things, they aren't necessarily the best options. You know, we can be more, you know, we can help the user out a little bit more than that, and especially on those initial sign up moments. Because another big thing as well is, and comes up way more than you would probably think, is that a lot of software, probably newer and not so new as well, you might be surprised to hear, just tends to drop their new users into a completely blank canvas with no kind of walkthrough, with no kind of help, with no kind of... That happens a lot more than you'd probably think. Last year I ran a whole month of UX reviews on some new software and some not so new, and I think about 90% of them had no onboarding whatsoever, which I thought was staggering. So something is better than nothing right now. Even if you're not an onboarding wizard, something is better than nothing, even if it's just hey, here's a video on how to use it. There are so many basic things. Hierarchy is another thing. Think about the old-fashioned newspapers. Hierarchy was invented to give us a way to know what was more important. What should I be looking at now? Is if I'm going to scan through this app, or if I'm going to scan through this marketing site, what is going to jump out to me as important? That's another big thing that tends to get forgotten about by developer-led design, is that everything is just the same. It's straight up and straight down. Nothing stands out. Contrast is a huge thing as well. I think, and this is where even design templates fail so often, is that contrast and design standards are completely lacking in a lot of areas. You go to a marketing site, a sign-up form, a web app, whatever that might be, and so much of those colors are drawn into the background. The contrast is way too low. And I think there's a couple of years ago, I think there were over 2 billion people that had some kind of visual impairment. And so you're already cutting out a huge number of potential users. There's just very basic things that even visual designers, sorry, I keep hacking on the visual designers, but they tend to do this as well because it looks cool, because it looks nice. Those very muted shades, those very pulling back. Like if we think about when a button is grayed out as well, because it can't be used at that moment in time, a lot of times people can't see that because, of these more than 2 billion people. So there are just some very simple standards, that you can follow for the hierarchies, the layouts, the walkthroughs, the use of color, keeping it simple. You don't want more than 2 or 3 colors, maybe some shades, consistency with interactions, consistency with placement, contrast. Just these very basic things will already help improve your app and just make sure that it's consistent throughout the entire system.
No, that's a good list, I think. I'll have to...
well, it's a lot of stuff, yeah.
Yeah, no, there is. No, but I think, after the show, after this, I might see if I can grab some links off you too and just make sure there's some things in the show notes. Those books you sort of mentioned, yeah. There was a few that we've already talked about, and obviously some links to your stuff. So, yeah, hey, Nathan, thanks so much for spending a early morning with us. I know it's, early for you. Do you want to just plug your, if you want, your course or your Twitter handle or whatever, just so people know where to get hold of you?
Twitter. I've got to be more consistent on Twitter. I have my ups and downs on Twitter, but you can find me on Twitter at Nathan J Powell UX. Came back a couple of years ago to Twitter after deleting my account, so Twitter handles were very hard to come by. But you can definitely grab me over there, and my course is developyourux.com, and so it's basically aimed at founders and developers, as we mentioned, who are probably on smaller teams and wanting to up their UX game and get an idea of some of the basic concepts. It's certainly not advanced. It's more like, take you a step by step through some of the most important areas that I just mentioned now on that list, and hopefully give examples of how you can improve those areas. And
nice. Well, I in the background signed up to it as we were talking, so I've got to your second landing page in the work sign up flow. It says awesome. Expect an email shortly, so I'm looking forward to that. Cool. Thank you, Nathan.
Thank you, man.
Nathan? Are you? I just listened to your latest non-tech founder podcast, and you guys are taking a bit of a break on that one without giving anything away. But you're running another one still.
Yeah, well, yes and no. I don't really know what's going on at the moment with the other two podcasts. So. Startup Apart was the podcast I was running with my ex-co-founder as well, Michael, from Nusi. And And yeah, I'm not really sure what's going on there either at the moment. So I will get back to you on that.
Okay, that's fine. But hey, for anyone who hasn't listened to them, they're obviously still in the archives. There's lots of older episodes to catch up on anyway while Nathan's working what he's doing. Having on, what are we, 12 episodes in, I can understand that people start getting a bit, it's tough to keep a schedule and we're just starting. So, yeah.
You guys are doing great, by the way. I said from the very beginning, like commenting to Michael about this, just the way you're approaching it on Twitter and everything and getting the word out, I think you guys are doing really well. And so I think you will continue to do so. So well done, guys.
Oh, we're enjoying it.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully Dan's enjoying talking to me occasionally. So we met up in person last week.
Yeah, we actually met in person last week for the first time. That's a good sign, Cole.
Oh, wow, cool.
Cool. Well, hey, anything? Do you want to cover anything, Dan, or we're all good to close out the show?
Just listen, for the folks who are listening, just remember you can reach out to us on Twitter at pushtoprodpod, or you can email the show at pushtoprodpod@gmail.com. And we'd love any suggestions or topics or questions that you've got. You can also hit Colin up directly on Twitter. He's at Gomo and I'm at Mr. Dan Miller. And so, yeah, leave us a rating, get in touch, tell us what you think. We're really looking forward to hearing from you. But again, thanks, Nathan. This has been awesome today. I've definitely learnt a lot, and I've learnt about your course there, which I said I've signed up to. So I'm looking forward to that. Thank you. And Cole, you've set this one up today. So thank you, Cole, for setting this one up. So
good. Thanks for everyone, and thanks for spending some time with us. And we'll see you on the next one. Cheers, Nath.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers, folks.
Bye.